That night was absolute chaos. The storm had started in the middle of the afternoon, and the wind mixing with rain against the windows made me feel trapped inside a drum. I spent the day catching up on chores I'd put off for weeks, folding laundry, sweeping floors, figuring the quiet would be my only company. I've been living alone in this quiet, out-of-the-way neighborhood for a while now. Visitors are rare, especially on nights like that. So when someone knocked at the door, a strange shiver ran up my spine. I tried to brush it off. Probably just a neighbor, I told myself. When I opened the door, he was there, soaked from head to toe, hair dripping, his heavy jacket clinging to him. He looked like he was in his 40s. The hood cast shadows over much of his face, but I could see he was shivering. He said his car had broken down nearby and he needed to use the phone. Something about the story felt off. There wasn't really a road close by, but who was I to judge? I forced a small smile and let him in, wanting to get it over with. I turned to grab the phone from the living room table, then heard the soft click of the door lock behind me. In an instant, my senses screamed. I froze with my hand in midair. There was no reason for him to lock the door. The way he did it, quiet and deliberate, felt calculated. My heart pounded, but I forced a deep breath and tried not to show fear. Turned slowly. He was standing in the middle of the room, watching me with an unreadable expression. He no longer looked uncomfortable. If anything, he seemed amused. He sized me up like a buyer inspecting something. He asked where the phone was. I pointed to the table, avoiding his eyes. My mind raced, looking for an excuse to make him leave without showing my fear. He didn't move toward the phone. Instead, he started walking around the room. His footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, slow, deliberate, as if he were inspecting everything. I watched him from the corner of my eye, my hands sweating. We were in a silent standoff. As he wandered, my mind scrambled for an escape plan. The door was locked. He stood between me and any easy route out. The windows were locked too, thick glass that would take forever to break. The storm outside had picked up, cutting off any chance of help. He didn't seem rushed. If anything, he enjoyed my barely contained fear. Gradually, he started talking, saying something different from what he'd told at the door. His tone was calm, almost casual, but every line sounded like a thinly veiled threat. He claimed he was just visiting town and had noticed my isolated, perfect house earlier that day. I felt exposed. My home didn't feel safe anymore. I tried to keep my voice steady and asked again if he wanted to use the phone, hoping he'd change his mind and leave. He gave me a cold, lifeless smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No rush," he said, shrugging like this was a casual visit. I couldn't hide my fear anymore. Taking a step back, my hands shaking, I tried to create distance. He noticed and, like a predator playing a game, mirrored me, stepping toward me and closing the gap. My only chance was the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I would have to be quick and hope he didn't notice. I threw out, "I'll grab you a towel," the first excuse that came to mind. He tilted his head, studying me like he was amused by my poor attempt, but then nodded. That gave me the opening I needed. I started toward the hallway with his gaze burning into my back. As soon as I turned down the hall, I picked up the pace. My only thought was to lock myself somewhere safe until he left. I darted into the master bedroom, shut the door, and turned the key with trembling hands. My heart was so loud I couldn't hear the storm. All my confidence crumbled as I realized how trapped I was. I searched for anything to defend myself with, a chair, a lamp, but nothing felt adequate against someone who had planned his moves. Slow, deliberate footsteps came down the hallway. He was unhurried, savoring every second. I crouched behind the bed, clutching my phone, trying to call for help. But there was no signal. The storm must have knocked it out. A chill ran down my spine. His footsteps stopped right outside the door. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any noise. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, waiting to hear his next move. The handle turned slowly. For a moment, I prayed the lock would hold. Then he started knocking, slow, rhythmic, almost mocking. Each knock felt like a reminder that I wasn't safe and that he was waiting for his chance. I closed my eyes and braced for the worst, convincing myself that if I stayed completely still, maybe he'd give up. After a few minutes, the knocking stopped. I waited longer, wary of a trick. The silence continued. When I finally crept to the window, there was no one in the yard. With a mixture of relief and suspicion, I unlocked the bedroom door and dashed to the living room. The front door was slightly open and rain poured in. He was gone. No sign of him, no trace of what he wanted. I never learned who he was or why he came. Since that night, I lock the door as soon as it gets dark. It's a habit now, a reminder that danger can show up any time, usually without warning. Working the graveyard shift at a gas station had never been my dream, but it paid the bills and was easy work. Most nights I snoozed between customers, sipping coffee, interrupted only occasionally by drunks or lost drivers. A few months ago, a customer started showing up almost every night, always between 3 and 4 in the morning. He was thin, in his 40s, with a scruffy beard and sunken eyes, always dressed in worn, baggy clothes. At first, I thought he was just another oddball wandering late at night. Soon I noticed a pattern that made me uneasy. Every time he came, he bought items that separately weren't suspicious, but taken together they were disturbing. One night it was a roll of duct tape, the next, industrial trash bags, then rope. I tried small talk. Working on a project? Going camping? But he only nodded, avoiding eye contact. It bothered me. After he left, there was this lingering unease, like something bad was on the horizon. One night he came in looking tense, hands shaking. He went straight to the tools section and grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight, the kind that lights up a long way. At the counter, I asked what he needed it for. Late-night fishing? He mumbled something I couldn't make out, dumped crumpled bills on the counter, and rushed out. The whole interaction left a knot in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was up to something. I hesitated, then called the police station and explained the situation, not in full detail, but enough that the officer took me seriously. He promised to send a patrol. I felt guilty for overreacting, but something inside said I'd done the right thing. A patrol car arrived shortly after. I watched as 2 officers spoke, then headed down the road where the man had gone. A few minutes later, an officer returned, looking disturbed. They'd found the man's car parked in a secluded spot near an old trail leading into dense woods. The vehicle looked like someone had turned it into a makeshift home. Inside, they found the items he'd bought: rope, trash bags, duct tape. A grimy mattress covered with torn blankets and food scraps sat in the back seat. The officer said it appeared he'd been living there. What chilled me most was that it didn't look like he was homeless by choice. He had money but stayed, collecting supplies that made no sense. When the officers questioned him, he was vague. He kept saying he was doing important work and that people wouldn't understand. The police searched for a criminal history or medical issues, but found nothing. No record, no obvious red flags. They told him he couldn't stay on private property and made him leave. Things cooled down after that, but the unease never left me. Every late-night customer after that made me glance twice, half expecting to see him. Weeks later, he returned around 3 in the morning looking worse, like he hadn't slept in days. He walked in as if searching for someone and bought only a battery for the flashlight he'd bought before. This time, I asked more directly if he worked nights. He stared at me, his eyes empty and distant. In a low whisper, he said, "It's safer at night. Nobody sees me." He paid and rushed out, like he was fleeing someone. I watched until he disappeared into the dark road, more convinced than ever something strange was happening. A few days later, an officer told me they'd found the car abandoned in the same spot, covered in dust, supplies still inside, but the man himself had vanished without a trace. No signs of violence, no indication why he'd left. Thinking about those nights still leaves a bitter feeling in me. Maybe I'll never know what he was planning. One thing's certain. His hollow stare haunts me to this day. It happened on a weekend I'd been looking forward to for weeks. My parents were away and I was 17 and relishing the independence. I set up in the basement with blankets, snacks, and a movie, my quiet refuge. But late that night, I started hearing noises upstairs. At first I convinced myself it was the house settling or the wind. Then the noises continued, soft footsteps, like someone trying not to be heard. I froze, listening. I called a friend, trying to laugh it off. He chalked it up to the wind, but the uneasy feeling didn't go away. As the movie wound down, the footsteps came again, several this time. Then the slow creak of a door closing. My heart raced. I knew the only door that made that sound was my bedroom door. I felt helpless. I dialed 911. The operator told me to stay put, and that help was on the way. Those minutes until the sirens felt like hours. When the police arrived, they swept the house. One officer later called me up from upstairs and said they'd found something strange. A nearly invisible entryway hidden behind a built-in closet in the upstairs hallway. Inside, it smelled of mold and dust, but there were signs someone had been there recently. Folded blankets, food wrappers, water bottles. The idea that someone might have been living hidden in my house while I was downstairs made my skin crawl. The officers searched for traces but found the place empty. The intruder had apparently slipped out when the police arrived. I felt a mix of fear and disgust. Small details I'd ignored before suddenly made sense. A glass slightly out of place, that persistent feeling of being watched. My parents reinforced doors and windows and installed security cameras the next day, but the invasion left a mark. Even now, when I hear a strange sound, my mind goes back to that night and the slow closing of a door upstairs. I learned to never underestimate the silence of an empty house. I'm not easily scared in public, so when I worked late nights as an office assistant, I usually shopped quietly at a 24-hour grocery store. The aisles were empty, the staff minimal, the perfect place for peace. But one night, something strange put me on edge. I noticed a man across an aisle staring straight at a shelf, but it felt like he was watching me from the corner of his eye. He pretended to be a shopper, yet moved awkwardly, as if he didn't know what he was doing. I told myself I was being paranoid and kept shopping. Every time I changed aisles, he appeared again, only a few feet away. He always seemed to be nearby, watching,